What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're gonna watch a Joe Rogan clip regarding the faces on Mars and hidden structures. Now, if you're into the end times type of prophecy and what's going to happen, there's supposed to be this grand deception and a one world government. The rabbit hole can continue going after that, but the reason why I want to bring this up to you, because I think this conversation may give you a hint of what could be the plan for this one world conception. Right now there's a lot of wars all over the world, or rumors of wars or actual wars going on, and it seems like the world is really tense, man, and we're just one move away from really going full-blown world war, and so, but in the end times there's going to be a lot of speculation goes around this, but there seems to be a grand deception that's going to unite the world. And let's see this clip, because I think this might give a hint on what could be the agenda for uniting the world, or what could possibly be the moment or the precipice of this thing to occur.
Man, what is that? Why don't I hear about that in school?
Yeah, well, we had Richard Hoagland on
Yes.
night after night after night after night for weeks on end
Yes.
when that came out. And
Yes.
actually, that face on Mars had a lot to do with my career path, actually.
Well, so what is your take on all this? Because one of the things that happened was with the face on Mars is the initial images were very grainy but fascinating, because it did kind of look like a face, but maybe even more remarkable, because sometimes there's faces like in the side of a rock, it looks like a face. More remarkable was the geometric pattern of the base of it.
Yeah.
And so I kind of dismissed that when the second images came out. So this is the original image. This is the original image that freaked everybody out.
Yeah.
They were like, oh my God, there's a face on Mars. And then they came up with these upgraded images, and I was like, well, that's not a face. It's just weird shadows, and it's probably just a mountain. But man, that's an odd shape.
Or that face has been doctored.
It could be true.
Yeah.
But also, then I looked at it and was like, that shape is interesting. Like it almost looks unnatural. Then the new images from very close to Cydonia that show a very clear square. This one's nuts, because this one is somewhere in the neighborhood of between plus 300 meters. Like, they don't know how much longer it is than 300 meters, but it's the minimum size of this thing is 300 meters across, and it's a full-on square. Right angle, right. It's like, what the hell is that?
Well,
Pull that picture up, Jimmy.
As a geologist, I was fascinated when Hoagland first started talking about what was happening here.
What's up, Jamie? Oh, that one. Yeah, the one that we...
Just to kind of give a little insight here, or my take on it, is why doctor the photos? They don't want us to know that there could be structures there that are not natural. What would that mean, though, right? When you think about it, well, here's my opinion. I think they're hiding these structures because it's going to change the narrative. It's going to change the history of the human timeline, and that can have a lot of impact. If you control the history, if you control what you say has happened, you really have a lot of power over people, and you can control narratives, and you can influence things, and you can bring things like Project Bluebeam and maybe create something that will influence people to think a certain way. That's the power of controlling these photos from space. But let's continue watching, where they're going to start talking about this square that I think a lot of you have seen it on Mars, and that's really, kind of hard to doctor. How do you doctor a symmetrical object on another planet?
Which one though?
Oh, it don't matter.
Some of
Just
them are
click
doctored.
on any of them.
Some of them are doctored though.
Yeah, the non-doctored one, the one next to it, like right there. Look at that. That's absolutely crazy.
So I don't know if I'm very familiar with this image. I don't know if you can see with your mind's eye. You're looking the lower left. That's a 90-degree angle. If you can see the rest of the 90-degree angle up at the top and over at the side, if you can trace out, that is one massive right there. Now you can see it. Yeah, the computer has cleaned it up. Nature does not work in 90-degree angles. You're not going to get wind erosion. Wind is called aeolian erosion. fluvial erosion, there's water erosion. You're not going to get 90-degree angles from wind or water. So one of the tenets in archaeology, when you see 90-degree angles, there's an intentionality underlying that structure. If it were a one-off, you could say maybe it's a fluke, and it's not. And this is on Mars. Jamie, I don't know if you can do this. Through Freedom of Information, NASA had to release all of the lunar images up through the Clementine mission. And they didn't want to do that. And when they did release them, they ended up pixeling out a whole bunch of stuff, which made it look even more obvious than it was.
They're just fucking with us at this point.
So you got to say, what is it on the lunar surface that we paid for with our tax dollars that we're not supposed to be seeing? And these were tower structures. Can you see the Clementine?
Are there any undoctored, unblurred versions of it that some
I haven't
nerd
seen them
has
in the
snuck out of
public.
the office?
I haven't seen them in the public domain.
But you've seen them privately?
No, but what I'm saying is through Freedom of Information,
Right, but have you ever seen the undoctored images?
No, what they were forced to release. Why in the world would they be pixelating the images that are on there that actually make them look even more obvious than they are? So what we're seeing, what Hoagland was talking about, what you're seeing on Mars is not happening in a vacuum. It's happening, we're seeing the same thing on the lunar surface to varying degrees. On Mars, there were 3-sided, 4-sided, 5-sided pyramids.
Look at the one in the upper right-hand corner. That's odd.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very odd.
So here's the kicker. We're sending the Viking probes, Viking 1, Viking 2 in the 70s, went to Mars. 19,000 images were captured from the orbiting part of the mission. The other craft landed on the surface, and I can just imagine being on the surface seeing this. It's like this thing's like a spider comes down the cloud of dust, and this little tube pops up, and some sticky dental floss stuff shoots out, and then they reel it in to collect dirt and microbes, and they reel it into broth because they're looking for evidence of life on Mars, and it's happening next to massive monuments and geometric structures that are now dated about 50,000 years BP, before present. So they're looking for microbes and signs of life next to the most massive signs of life that you could imagine.
These, you said they're dated to 50,000 BC, these structures? BP, before present.
Before present, yeah.
So how do they know that?
Those were when the Cydonia mission, that's the Cydonia scientists are estimating 50,000 years, and the same with the lunar. I'm hesitating.
But the Sidonian, how do they estimate that? If they're using probes from that far away?
They're using probes, and I think geologically they're using, it's relative dating. They're looking at strata and things like that. And from the lunar sites, they brought back samples. And yeah, I'm hesitating because I don't know how deep you want to go with all this, but
as deep as you want.
Well, the samples that came back from the lunar surface had traces of metals that do not occur naturally in nature. They are the product of advanced machinery. And
what metals are these?
These were metals that came back when they brought back from the Apollo mission, and I think they brought back. I need to remember the names. That's one Jamie can look up. What the metals were that came back, and they don't know where those metals came from. So is this
metals from Cydonia, or is this metals from the moon?
This is from the lunar sites in the craters.
So the structures on the moon, how old they think they're the same age as the structures on Cydonia?
They're estimating 50,000 BP. There's a race for the moon right now, and I'm fascinated by this. There was a time only 2 nations on Earth had the money and the technology to go to the moon. It was the former Soviet Union and the former United States, because neither one's the same country anymore. And both those countries have been so broke, they haven't been able to do it. India and China are now sending the probes to the moon. We were going to the moon during the Cold War, and it was a crazy time. It was actually a very civilized war. I mean, the governments were at war, but the scientists were still cooperating. And there was an agreement that we would not share publicly what was found on the lunar surface. And Russia did the same thing. China was never part of that agreement. So China has said when they land, they're going to televise live what they find on the lunar surface to the people of the earth. My sense, Joe, and this will lead into a whole conversation we're going to have here. I think they'll find the archaeological structures that we know are there, that we've seen in the photographs, the inscriptions on those structures. We're going to be able to read, because there's a thinking that those structures are from ETs from another time, but the evidence suggests they're from us, from a time in our past, a cycle of civilization where we did great and beautiful things by working together until we destroyed one another through war, and that we're repeating that cycle again. So when they
Isn't
send
that like drawing a lot of conclusions? Isn't there?
They start picking apart, Joe starts picking apart the theory. He misunderstood. He thought he was talking about Mars, but it was actually the moon. And if you picked it up, for those of you that are very well versed in this space and are watchers and trying to pick up, where we're at in the time and in the end times, you have to remember that if you subscribe to the biblical narrative, the temptation was eat the fruit because you'll be like God. And it's always like we're the most amazing creation and we can be like God, so we can do anything we want. And so I hear little hints of that. The other thing that I'm hearing with this, and this could be the narrative, China, they're a communist country, and their popularity has been growing in this nation because of propaganda or whatever. But they're going to go and they're going to reveal to the world, when they get there, that we're a lot older than we thought, and this could bring the world together, especially if there's war going on, and this could open up more disclosure options as far as like, well, now we understand where we come from, and removing the idea of creation and bringing in more narratives to trick people, to deceive people, to take them away from the birthright of, that God has provided for them. This is my theory. Some of you may not believe in God, that's okay, but it's still important to know that maybe that's why people are so protective in people who do archaeology and history. They're very protective about it. The Smithsonian groups and how they are allegedly taking a lot of historical sites with giant bones, and everyone knows that theory, that they do that, and there's a lot of evidence that points that they probably do. But maybe that's why they're so protective of the narrative, because there is an agenda to suggest that an ET from outside of this world will come and save us, and what better way to prime people or to highly suggest to them, hey, these are the structures that we used to build, and it'll be a lot easier to usher in something from another dimension or world to influence people to give up their right or to give up their countries and come together and accept the beast system. I know it's a lot of things that I'm sharing here, and a lot of you will understand what I'm saying. And if you don't, there's a lot of information out there about this. You could probably look it up. If you'd like me to do a video on some of this a little bit more extensive, let me know. Let me know your comments. Do you think if China beats everyone to the punch, that we will find structures on the moon, and what's that going to entail? Let me know, drop a comment. That's all I got. Thank you for stopping by.